What happens when the same fire that built a superstar's career threatens to burn it all to the ground? For years, Cardi B was the definition of raw success, the girl from the Bronx who hustled her way into Grammy wins, sold-out shows, and a global empire. But behind the glitter and the headlines, another story has been playing out. A story of fights, trials, confessions, and lawsuits so wild that some fans are now asking the question no celebrity ever wants to hear: is this the scandal that ends it all? And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see why so many believe Cardi's empire isn't just shaking, it's collapsing. Because this isn't just about one courtroom battle. It's about a trail of chaos that stretches back years, from strip club attacks to shocking livestream confessions, each one painting a darker picture than the last. Now, before we dive into the trial that could cost Cardi millions, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, not just so you don't miss the next chapter in this story, but because what we're about to uncover is only the beginning. So let's get into it. August 2025. A quiet courthouse in California suddenly became the stage for one of the most talked about celebrity trials in years. And sitting at the center of it wasn't a politician or a billionaire CEO, it was Cardi B. Not on stage with flashing lights and screaming fans, but at the defendant's table, staring down accusations that could cost her millions. The case? Ellis versus Almanzar. The plaintiff, Amani Ellis, once worked as a security guard at a Beverly Hills OB/GYN clinic. She claims what should have been a normal day in 2018 turned into a nightmare when Cardi, pregnant with her first child at the time, allegedly snapped. According to Ellis, the superstar unleashed a violent outburst, slurs, spitting, and even clawing at her face with nails sharp enough to leave permanent scars. Ellis says she needed stitches and plastic surgery, and to make matters worse, she claims Cardi used her fame to get her fired from the clinic, leaving her humiliated and unemployed. Cardi's response? Denial. On the stand, she admitted to hurling insults. Yes, but scratching, spitting, and racial slurs? She said it never happened. Still, one small slip during testimony made the entire courtroom buzz. She admitted calling Ellis a B, and then came the surreal moment that turned the trial viral. Ellis's lawyer demanded Cardi hold up her nails for the jury. Imagine it, one of the world's biggest rappers raising her hands like evidence in a crime scene, strangers studying the length and shape of her manicure to decide if they could have cut someone's face. Absurd? Yes, but deadly serious. The courtroom felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a reality show. Questions about her wigs, snarky comments from lawyers, even the judge looking fed up. But underneath the theatrics was a chilling reality. If the jury believes even part of Ellis' story, Cardi could be forced to pay millions. And here's where it gets even scarier for Cardi. This isn't just about money. In a civil trial, Ellis doesn't need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. She just has to convince the jury it's more likely than not that Cardi crossed the line. With a history of explosive headlines and public fights trailing behind her, that bar gets easier to clear. But the real danger isn't just what's happening inside that California courtroom, it's what happens when people start connecting this case to her past. Because this trial, it isn't the first time Cardi B's temper has made headlines. Most celebrities face lawsuits at some point. It comes with fame. But for Cardi B, this case feels different. It isn't just about one security guard in one clinic. It's about whether the world believes Cardi's reputation has finally caught up with her. Here's why. In a civil trial, the rules aren't the same as criminal court. Ellis doesn't have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. She just has to convince the jury that it's more likely than not that Cardi snapped. One shaky answer, one inconsistency, one detail that doesn't line up, and suddenly the verdict tips against her. And when you look at Cardi's history, that's where the real danger begins. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Cardi isn't a squeaky clean celebrity with no baggage. She has a public record of fights, meltdowns, and confessions that paint her as someone who does lose control. That history doesn't just haunt her, it makes Ellis' story sound more believable. To make things worse, there's no video evidence. In an age where every celebrity meltdown ends up on TikTok, the absence of footage has fans divided. Some wonder if Cardi's team buried the tapes. Others think Ellis exaggerated the entire story. And in a case like this, where everything comes down to credibility, perception is everything. So the question isn't just, did this one fight happen? The real question is, does this fight fit a pattern? Because when the world starts connecting dots, the picture isn't flattering. And as you're about to see, this trial is just one chapter in a much longer story. A story where Cardi B's temper has already exploded in ways that shocked the world. If the 2025 trial sounds shocking on its own, it's only because you haven't seen the full picture. The truth is, Cardi B's temper has been making headlines for years, and every time it does, the incidents seem to get bigger, louder, and harder to ignore. Let's rewind to 2018. Long before the security guard lawsuit ever reached a courtroom, Cardi was already in the middle of one of her most infamous legal battles. The scene, a strip club in Queens, New York. The targets, two bartending sisters, and the reason, rumors that one of them had been involved with her husband, Offset. Witnesses didn't call it an argument, they called it a planned attack. Chairs, bottles, and drinks were thrown across the bar. One sister was left with cuts and bruises, her head slammed into a counter. 2 weeks later, the second sister said Cardi's crew came back for round two, allegedly after organizing the attack through social media and cash payoffs. The charges, 14 counts, including 2 felonies for attempted assault. That wasn't a heated moment. That was prosecutors accusing Cardi of premeditated violence. But instead of prison time, she walked away with a 2022 plea deal, guilty to third-degree assault and reckless endangerment. Her punishment? 15 days of community service, a slap on the wrist. And just when the headlines started to cool down, another incident blew up, this time in front of the fashion world's elite. New York Fashion Week 2018. Cardi B spotted Nicki Minaj across the room at Harper's Bazaar's annual Icons party. Instead of exchanging words, Cardi hurled a shoe straight at her rival in front of stunned photographers, stylists, and celebrities. The fight made international news, cementing the image of Cardi as someone who didn't just argue, she exploded. Even without criminal charges, the damage was clear. To fans, these weren't isolated outbursts. They looked like a timeline. A pattern. Each altercation painted Cardi less as the boss running her empire and more as someone constantly losing control. And that's exactly why the 2025 trial is so dangerous. Because when a jury hears about Imani Ellis's claims, even if the judge bars references to her past, the public is already filling in the blanks. To them, it's not just one fight in one doctor's office. It's part of a bigger story, a superstar with a reputation for turning every feud into a battlefield. But as bad as that history looks, the next chapter in Cardi's timeline made things far worse. Not because someone else exposed her, but because she exposed herself. Cardi's courtroom battles and public fights were damaging enough. But what came next was even worse, because this time, nobody exposed her. She exposed herself. Back in 2016, before superstardom, Cardi went live on Instagram to talk about her past. What she admitted wasn't just raw, it was disturbing. In her own words, she described how she would lure men back to hotel rooms, drug them, and rob them while they were unconscious. She didn't whisper it, didn't hide it, didn't even look embarrassed. She called it survival. Her exact words, "I did what I had to do to survive." The clip resurfaced in 2019, and the backlash was immediate. Critics compared her to Bill Cosby, pointing out the same disturbing formula, drugging people who trusted you, leaving them powerless. The only difference was motive. But for many, that didn't make it any less horrifying. And just when fans thought she might show remorse, Cardi doubled down. In interviews as late as 2024, she said she didn't regret it, that given the same circumstances, she'd do it again. For some fans, this was too much. They defended her come-up, her Bronx hustle, her fight to survive poverty. But for others, the hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. In the middle of the Me Too era, when male celebrities were being canceled for far less, why was Cardi getting a pass? If a man had admitted to drugging women, would his career still exist? What made it even worse was the casualness of her confession. Cardi wasn't caught in court documents or exposed by enemies. She gave the story away herself. And now every time she faces a trial, those old words come back like a shadow. If she admitted to this on camera, what else is she capable of when the cameras aren't rolling? The live stream didn't just stain her past, it poisoned her present. Because once you brag about crossing that line, people start questioning everything else. And as the lawsuits piled up, that suspicion only grew stronger. Because Cardi's confessions might have been the most shocking moment, but they were far from the last. If Cardi's confessions left fans stunned, what followed proved one thing: the scandals never stopped. In fact, the lawsuits seemed to multiply, each one piling on top of the last, turning her career into a permanent courtroom saga. Fast forward to July 2023. Cardi was performing at a Las Vegas beach club when a fan tossed a drink at her mid-performance. Most artists might have brushed it off or let security handle it. Cardi didn't. She hurled her microphone straight into the crowd. Cameras caught everything, and within hours, the clip went viral. At first, police sided with her, calling it self-defense. But the story didn't end there. By 2025, an Ohio woman had filed a lawsuit claiming she was the one struck, accusing Cardi of assault, battery, and negligence. Instead of walking away with a memory of the concert, she says she left with scars, both physical and emotional. Then came the feud that refuses to die, Cardi versus blogger Tasha K. In 2022, Cardi actually won a $4 million defamation lawsuit after Tasha spread false rumors about her on YouTube. You'd think victory would bring closure. Instead, it fueled an even nastier fight. By 2023, Tasha had filed for bankruptcy, claiming she couldn't pay. Cardi's lawyers fired back, accusing her of hiding money overseas and lying about her finances. What should have been a legal win turned into a drawn-out, messy war, one that kept Cardi tied to negativity long after the verdict. And then came the most dangerous lawsuit of all. Not about a fight, not about defamation, but about her music itself. August 2025, producers Joshua Fatro and Miguel Aguilar accused Cardi of ripping off their 2021 track Greasy Fry Bread for her single Enough Miami. But they didn't just want money. They wanted her banned from performing it, streaming it, even including it on her upcoming album Am I the Drama? For any artist, that's catastrophic. For Cardi, it was a nightmare. Her comeback album, the one meant to rebuild her empire, threatened before it even dropped. One by one, the lawsuits stacked higher. Assault, battery, defamation, copyright theft. Even when she won, the damage was already done, because fans don't just remember verdicts, they remember headlines. And Cardi's headlines read less like a career resume and more like a rap sheet. But as destructive as those cases were, they weren't the final blow. What really began to shift the tide wasn't just the courtroom drama. It was the perception that a darker pattern was emerging, one that cut deeper than money or music. Court cases can drain money, but they don't always destroy careers. What really threatens a superstar is when the culture itself starts to turn. And in Cardi B's case, that's exactly what's been happening. For years, Cardi was celebrated as the raw, unfiltered voice of the streets, someone who spoke her mind with no filter, no apology. But somewhere along the way, the same unfiltered honesty that made her famous started working against her. Take the accusations of colorism. Old clips resurfaced where Cardi made remarks about darker-skinned black women, comments that fans called offensive and dismissive. For someone who built her empire on authenticity and female empowerment, these words cut deep, leaving fans wondering if the image of Cardi as a champion of women was more marketing than reality. Then came the criticism from within the very movement she claimed to represent. Cardi once positioned herself as a feminist icon, proof that women could dominate rap and own their sexuality without shame. But critics began asking hard questions. How does feminism fit with bragging about drugging and robbing men? How does empowerment line up with publicly feuding, throwing shoes, and settling fights in strip clubs? For many, the contradictions became impossible to ignore. And social media, the same platform that built her, started turning. Every live stream, every Twitter rant, every fight with fans fueled the fire. Instead of shaping her own narrative, Cardi often gave her critics more ammunition. She wasn't just battling lawsuits in court, she was battling the court of public opinion, and the jury there was far less forgiving. What made it even worse was the timing. By 2024 and 2025, a new generation of rappers and influencers were rising fast, ready to grab the spotlight. And while Cardi was still tied up in courtrooms and scandals, the culture was moving forward without her. The message from fans was loud and clear. It wasn't just about whether Cardi won or lost in court. It was about whether she could still hold on to the title of cultural icon while the world around her decided her time might be up. But the story doesn't end with public backlash. Because while fans debated her image, Cardi was facing something even more dangerous, the question of survival. Not just as an artist, but as a brand, a business, and an empire hanging by a thread. At this point, the question isn't whether Cardi B can survive one more lawsuit, it's whether she can survive the weight of them all. Because when you zoom out, it's not just about Amani Ellis or Tasha K or one microphone toss, it's about the slow erosion of everything Cardi built. Her music career is already showing cracks. The copyright lawsuit threatening her 2025 album, Am I the Drama, doesn't just risk one single being pulled, it risks derailing the entire comeback that was supposed to prove Cardi still ruled rap. Without fresh hits, her spot in the industry is vulnerable, especially with younger rappers waiting to take her place. Her brand deals are on shaky ground too. Major companies don't like controversy, they like stability, marketability, safety. Every new headline about a lawsuit or confession makes her harder to sell. For someone whose endorsements brought in millions, that's a ticking time bomb. And then there's Cardi the icon. For years, she wasn't just a rapper, she was a movement, a symbol of survival, of making it from nothing. But with every courtroom appearance, every resurfaced live stream, every backlash on social media, that image fades a little more. To some, she's no longer the Bronx hustler who beat the odds. She's the celebrity who couldn't outrun her own chaos. That doesn't mean the story's over. Cardi's resilience has shocked people before. Every time she was counted out, she came back swinging, sometimes literally. But the difference now is that she's not just fighting rivals or bloggers. She's fighting time, reputation, and an industry that moves on fast. So what happens next? Maybe she stages a redemption arc, turning the scandals into lessons and the lawsuits into history. Or maybe the weight proves too heavy and her empire crumbles under the very chaos that built it. Either way, one thing's certain, Cardi B's story isn't just about fame and fortune. It's about what happens when the fire that makes you unstoppable starts burning everything in its path. And if you've stuck with me this far, you know this isn't the last time Cardi's name will dominate the headlines. The only question left is, will it be for the music or for the mess? So here's the truth, Cardi B's biggest trial isn't just in a California courtroom, it's in the court of public opinion. Juries can hand down verdicts, judges can set fines, but the real decision comes from fans, from you. Because at the end of the day, a superstar's career lives or dies not by lawsuits, but by whether people still care enough to listen. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Cardi B can bounce back from all this, or is her empire already crumbling beyond repair? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'll be reading them. And if you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive into the scandals, the trials, and the untold stories behind the headlines. Because trust me, this Cardi B story, it's far from over,